Good morning, Merry Christmas. It is the 11th day of Christmas, and Happy New Year. It is Monday, January 4th, and this is Church at Home 2021. I hope that you all had a wonderful weekend, enjoyed the worship yesterday for the second Sunday after Christmas. Today, I'd like to pick up the topic of what does church look like? How do we look, pandemic and post-pandemic? And I talked a bit about church and worship and things like that last week. But today I'd like to talk about worship itself. We're looking at worshiping differently right now because of the pandemic. We know that. And there's not much we can change. As a matter of fact, we shouldn't, because we're trying to keep people safe. And at the moment, of course, we're under lockdown here in Alberta. So we are in the Diocese of Edmonton. We are worshiping from afar for a little longer. We're not entirely sure when that will end, but as much as I miss worshiping in person, I would much rather worship this way and have all of my members of my congregation safe and healthy than risking the chance that anyone could get sick, especially from one of our services. But when we do get back together, recognizing that this isn't just for a few more weeks, this is going to take a while, what can we do to help enhance our worship? What can we do to recognize that we're not going back? We're not going to look like what we did before. And we're not entirely sure what we'll look like after the pandemic. But in the meantime, we are still called to worship with integrity and with dignity and to give to God all that we have. And so I keep thinking about the temporary feel of worship right now. Part of that could be because St. Mary's in Edgerton still can't worship in the church. And when we go back to in-person worshiping, we will be at Faith United Church in Edgerton, which is fantastic and very generous of them. But it's just not home. And at St. Thomas, we've got pews shoved against the walls, and we've got, dude is groaning down below me. We've got pews shoved up against the walls. We have arrows on the floor. We have a hand sanitizing station on a TV table. We have a garbage can beside the font. There's such a sense of temporariness. It's a sense that this isn't real, that what we're doing is biding our time. When we worship, we should never feel like we are biding our time. Just 1 second here. When we worship, we should feel like we are able to transcend or where we are, to enter into a space and a moment with God where we can give all of who we are and receive from God all that God has to offer us, to be filled up, that when we leave worship, we go back out into the world and we are able to share His Son, Jesus Christ, with others, that we are able to feel the presence of the Holy Spirit in our lives. And while I absolutely believe that is happening even when we have this sort of temporary feel, I have to ask myself, what might it feel like when we don't feel so temporary? Part of my concern may be that I don't know what regular worship looks like or feels like at either Edgerton or Wainwright at St. Thomas. Because when I got here, we were in the middle of the pandemic and everything is the way it is. But we need to embrace the fact that we can't leave everything the way it is and assume that this is forever in the middle of this. As I sort of look at this pandemic and this pandemic living in churchland, kind of like when we move. When Rob and I have moved, sometimes I get on the ball and I unpack boxes, and within a couple of weeks we've got all our pictures on the wall. We have our boxes all are taken apart. Everything has a place to live, and we are able to make the place our home. There's always things we move or hang another picture or move some furniture that'll fit better later. But there's a sense that when we put our feet up after supper at night, we are home. And I'm wondering how at home we are. How at home are we when we're worshiping in a different church completely? Or when we walk in and we see, arrows all over the floor pointing us in one direction, or a garbage can beside a font that speak of two completely different symbols, like two completely different messages that come from those two things. So how do we find a way to faithfully not live in the midst of boxes? How do we find a way to live as if this is our home right now in these circumstances, because they are? An example I can use is Round Lake. When we moved from Halifax in July of 2019, we moved to Round Lake, about 40 minutes from Petawawa, where Rob was based, and our house was tiny. It was lovely. It was on the lake. There were so many things that were wonderful about it, but we never unpacked. Our offices never got done. My books were sitting stacked in places that I couldn't have found them if I'd tried. We had clothes that we never did on get out of boxes. Rob's models and his Lego remained in boxes, and our basement was an absolute catastrophe. Finding Christmas stuff was an interesting thing to do. And the whole time we lived there, it felt temporary. It felt like we were waiting for the next thing to happen. And it turns out that we did. We were only there a year, and then Rob was posted to Wainwright, and we're here now and trying to make this our home. We're still working on the basement, still trying to find places for things and hang pictures. I hung some on New Year's Day, and my office now feels like my office, and I feel more centered and grounded. What do we need to do in our spaces as they are available to us? What do we need to do in our worship times that will help us to feel grounded, to help us to feel that we are in an eternal moment with God? Because we are. In that moment when we worship God, we are eternally with Him. It is a divine and sacred time, Kairos time. How do we make our environment look like that? I don't know, because it's hard, because I don't know what things were like before I came. I only know that right now it feels like we're living in the in-between, like we're waiting in an airport for our next plane to go and it keeps getting delayed. And that's no way to live. We need to find a way to worship and to create an environment in our worship space that when we walk in, we can settle. We can sit down and close our eyes and pray. We can learn to worship in ways that maybe don't involve singing, but still allow us whatever it was that singing gave to us. So I think the actual way of worship is a topic for another day. Today I think I'm just thinking about the actual space we live in. How do we make our worship spaces feel eternal and comfortable and welcoming for others, for ourselves, and for a welcoming place for us to meet God where we are? I'm not entirely sure what the answer to that is. If you have any ideas, please send them to me, comment or email me and let me know. But I think that we need to stop living as if this is going to end tomorrow and we're going to go back to normal, and figure out, how do we live with integrity today? How do we live and worship with comfort today? And how do we make others feel comfortable with us as we are comfortable with God? Have a wonderful day, folks. Enjoy this beautiful Monday morning. Take good care of yourselves. Stay home if you can. If you have to go out, wear your mask. Stay away from people. We need to get this, that we need to not just put the numbers down on COVID. We need to get everybody healthy and then vaccinated. And then we can figure out what our new normal might be. So God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home.